Hello there. It isn't a conspiracy theory, and some MPs are now asking serious questions, and this could be the final battle for our future freedoms. Some MPs are now catching on to the ambitions that the United Nations has for controlling the global healthcare emergency responses. We're now being told that UK ministers fear that if a new treaty is signed by the UK, stay-at-home orders and medication could be imposed on us by the UN's World Health Organization. They now fear it, we're told, as if this has just emerged. Sorry, this has been on the card since 2021 at least, and we now hear about the fear of our ministers. Question: is this the controlled fear of the controlled opposition, now that many in our population are starting to ask serious questions about this? But I don't know what all these ministers are afeared of. The UK is part of the UN and part of its Security Council to boot. We helped set up this organ and helped make the UN's World Health Organization the arbiter of, world health, an arbiter that must be obeyed and never criticised. So why are they now criticising it? Is it because of the democratic angle, the right for a country to maintain its own sovereignty? Yeah, right. Because there is another angle to this, that of Big Pharma and the vast financial clout of the intellectual property rights over its medicinal patents. If the WHO were to gain the powers it craves, it would allow them to plunder the pharma databases for patented interventional medicines, such as those used in the recent health emergency, and hand them over for free to the poorer nations on Earth. The global socialization of medicine at the expense of Big Pharma and its investors. Now I ask you, which of those two concerns will Tory ministers be most worried about? That of democracy, independence and sovereignty, or that of Big Pharma finance? Anyway, you would think that if the UK refuses to sign up to this new health emergency treaty, then we protect both our democratic rights and the intellectual property rights of Big Pharma. Job done. But no, we will be signing up to it, be in no doubt. There is a communism-based requirement from somewhere to ensure that the global population is controlled in all facets of their lives, and health is the way in. The only issue now remaining is for our betters to work out how Big Pharma can be induced to freely hand over the fruits of its work without losing money. And that means the wealthy nations paying for the investment Big Pharma gets, ensuring Big Pharma's continued immunity from any repercussions while keeping the money flowing to their shareholders and directors, but socialising the output across the globe. A continual mechanism to effectively tax the wealthy nations to provide an ever-increasing level of global healthcare. This is the start of an international health service system where the rich nations pay. And the NHS is already set up to be plugged into it. It already is an international health service. And now we hear from the Times that UK general practitioners will be getting an added bonus. If they sign patients up to Big Pharma clinical trials, they get more money. Yep, the number of willing trial participants has fallen, for some inexplicable reason. In fact, it's almost halved since 2018 to 28,000 people. But our ministers are promising to give Big Pharma better access to NHS patients so as to grow the healthcare economy and develop better treatments. Well, 28,000. Haven't we just had a trial that involved millions, in fact billions worldwide? The most extensive and successful event in our medical history, or so we're told. Why has that safe and effective event been airbrushed out of our recent history? Oh, but that happened after 2018 and has just ended to all intents and purposes. Is that why it's being ignored? And as a sweetener, the Chancellor and former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt is putting together a £650 million package to boost UK life sciences. And he wants to quadruple patient involvement in trials by 2027, so that these companies can test their stuff on even more real human beings. And we've only just had the International Health Emergency Summit in Brussels on May the 3rd, where a Dr. David Martin laid out the history of that particular event in stark and very troubling detail. A history that goes back to the 1960s, not just late 2019. And everything he said was backed up fully by public domain documents. Something some would sum up as the weaponization of nature against the people in the pursuit of vast financial gain. But of course that can't possibly be true with the WHO around to monitor our health, can it? But when you hear stuff like this, you suddenly get an inkling into why the government, nor indeed the entire Westminster blob, will start an inquisition into the health emergency. They will not want to rock any big pharma boat. It would also explain the complete defenestration of Andrew Bridgen. And when during business questions in the Commons, Bridgen was questioning whether the new BBC Verify unit would be fact-checking the claims made by government and big pharma about their responses to the health emergency, he was heckled by the other MPs and got this response from the Leader of the House, Penny Mordaunt.
Well, President.
Well, I think we've all just had a very important moment, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think we should pause for a moment because I think we may have just heard the first cuckoo of spring. The honourable gentleman will forgive members chuntering from a sedentary position when he asks this question. The only way members of this House and the public can be assured of the facts and arrive at decisions themselves is if we have freedom of speech, the freedom to be able to say things, but also the freedom to be able to learn things, the freedom to be able to be uncertain about things. And part of that is ensuring that people can take information from a wide variety of sources. And we do have reliable, honest, high standards in journalism, of which I think the BBC do qualify, as does the House of Commons Library. And I would just say to all people listening to this debate that we value these things greatly. They are part of our democracy and they should provide certainty for members in this place and the public. And I would just say to the honourable gentleman he might like to make use of some of those services.
Richard will have something to say about that in a couple of minutes. And now we go walkabout for some environmental news. We've seen the eco-loons supergluing themselves to anything they can to gain attention, upending milk in supermarkets and spraying buildings with orange paint while indulging in criminal damage by smashing their windows, as well as traipsing slowly about our roads, generally unhindered by the police, and causing as much traffic havoc as they can. Their aim is to severely limit our freedoms on the basis that it's no good having freedoms if there's no environment to enjoy them in. But the repercussions of the green agenda is the imposition of such things as 15-minute neighbourhoods, clean air zones and ULEZs, all part of removing the freedom of personal transport from our lifestyles. And there has been a predictable backlash to that, with anti-ULEZ protesters warning of French-style unrest to put a stop to it all, and damaging or removing ULEZ enforcing traffic cameras, all on the basis that human rights of freedom to move about the country at will should be respected. i.e., what's the point in saving the planet on what some believe is a flawed argument if it means imprisoning humanity potentially forever? Now, I'll ask the question, which of those two groups will be tarnished as the right-wing terrorists and attract the most vigorous of state security forces' most physical action? Richard.
We just may have heard the first cuckoo of spring. That is the mature opening to a reply that Leader of the House of Commons Penny Mordaunt gave to a legitimate question offered by Reclaim MP Andrew Bridgen about the BBC's new fact-checking service. And the laughs and giggles across the benches were juvenile and gut-wrenching. This is the base level of wit offered by the Leader of the House. Mordaunt then said that we have reliable and honest high standards of journalism for which, she said, the BBC does qualify, as does the House of Commons Library, and that they should provide certainty for members of the House of Commons and the public. So there we have it. The government's position is the BBC and Parliament is to be trusted as an authority on everything. Or am I wrong? Am I reading this wrong? I don't think so. It was sad to see the one honest man in Parliament once again being belittled and mocked with such disdain for approaching topics of great concern across this country. A man who has offered nothing but evidence-based, peer-reviewed scientific data to Parliament, only to be scoffed at again. Bridgen has been branded pretty much a racist and a conspiracy theorist, which as far as I'm concerned is the type of response of someone who has already lost an argument and doesn't want to engage in a debate they will ultimately lose. And more to the point, such insults are usually levied by persons and institutions with things to hide. Yes, when they play the player and not the ball. And that has become the default setting of this government and its MPs. Is it any wonder the people no longer trust the political system? This government and members of the opposition have gaslit the people over the encroaching jurisdiction that a certain global health body has over the people. Yet we continue to comply and pay our taxes. Why? These people are supposed to represent us, but they don't. And at some point I fear the people will say no more in a very, well, let's say unceremonious manner. Has it always been such? It's very hard to get your head around the fact that government is nothing more than an institution set up for controlling the masses under the spurious disguise of a democratic body where the people believe they get what they vote for. Well, to some degree, they certainly do get what they vote for when they vote for compromised political parties in a rigged system. I honestly believe that the Reclaim Party, the Heritage Party, but to name but a few, are the only hope this country have left to effect change via the ballot box before it's too late and the right to vote for or the ability to vote for such parties is removed once and for all. We must support these alternative parties who represent the traditional values of this country. And these parties need to work together, but I'm not sure how that would work, because the people of Britain need a figurehead and a banner to unite behind. Britain needs a viable political alternative, and it needs it now. We don't have the luxury of looking at the long game for toppling the two-party system, and Britain doesn't need an overgrown ego at the helm. It needs a humble man, someone who can unite the people of this country, who have had enough of the left-wing, right-wing identity politics, and they just want a country worth believing in instead of a state that they fear. Either that, or it's time for the people just to walk away from the rule of corrupt government. Look, I was about to end this video here until I watched Dr. Campbell's video on the Global Health Authority and the reaction and interpretation that a few MPs have had in relation to unsaid Global Health Authority. Jeff just touched on this subject as well, and I find the whole thing just utterly terrifying. Many of us voted for Brexit because we believe in self-governance and democracy. Yet this appears to be, this appears to be conceded by our government without vote to yet another external and unelected body. It doesn't matter if you regard yourself as left-wing or right-wing. I just ask why our representatives are not rebelling en masse over this Orwellian centralisation of power to yet another outside body. Oh yes, silly me. Our elected representatives don't represent us. These are dark times. If you think the mandates of yesteryear are behind us, well, think again. The British state is as meaningless and as inconsequential as it was when we were in the EU. Years ago, I learned as a musician that music is the space between the notes. Well, we are in the middle of a symphonic refrain before the next movement, and I fear the next movement will be so dramatic that it will shock all of us. As I said earlier, so much is riding on our political alternative representation. We must ask questions of those in the alternative parties, like, why is there no grand coalition of these smaller parties? If Reform doesn't reach out to Reclaim and the Heritage Party and others, we should ask why they won't. Anyway, what do you lot think about what has been covered in today's video? Leave your pearls of wisdom in the comment section below. And we will see you again tomorrow with our late morning or early afternoon video by Jeff. And I will see you again tomorrow between 5:45 and 7:15. You lot take care. Bye now.